The call came at 6:47 in the morning while I was 3 hours north of Sudbury, sitting in a Tim Hortons parking lot, eating a breakfast sandwich I didn't taste. My phone lit up with my neighbor Bev's number. Bev, who had lived across the street from us for 11 years, who brought soup when my daughter had her tonsils out, who had never once called me before 8 a.m. in her life. "Something's wrong at your house." Her voice was strange, compressed, like she was trying very hard to stay calm. "I can hear Poppy crying. Not normal crying, Thomas." I heard it through my kitchen window, and I went to the fence, and I could hear her through the basement window. "It's been going on for a long time. Where are you?" I was in Sudbury because my son-in-law had suggested the contracting opportunity. He knew the site supervisor, thought it would be good for me to be away for a few days. He'd offered to watch Poppy himself while my wife was visiting her sister in Montreal. He'd insisted, actually. I pulled up the home security app before Bev finished talking. What I saw on that screen, I've tried to describe it to people since, and I can't do it properly. Some things don't fit into words. My 9-year-old daughter was in the cold storage room at the back of our basement. The one with the concrete walls and no insulation and a door that locks from the outside. She was sitting on the bare floor with her knees pulled up to her chest, rocking. The lights were off. In the green-gray of the night vision feed, I could see her mouth was open. She'd been crying long enough that no sound was coming out anymore. My son-in-law was visible at the top of the basement stairs, just his legs and the bottom of his jeans. But I recognized his sneakers. He was sitting there, watching. I called Bev back. I told her to call 911 and then go to my front door. I told her the code to the lockbox. "Get inside," I said. "Get Poppy out of that room," she said, already moving. Then I left the Tim Hortons parking lot doing things with my truck on Highway 144 that I won't put down in writing. My name is Thomas Wark. I'm 51 years old. I spent 22 years as a structural engineer for a mining company, which means I have spent most of my adult life learning to read situations that could kill people, identifying the point where stress becomes catastrophic, finding the hidden fracture before it opens. I thought I was good at it. I thought I knew how to see things coming. I did not see this coming. My daughter Poppy is 9. She likes math and horses and those miniature crime documentary shows on CBC Gem that she absolutely should not be watching, but I let her anyway because she falls asleep on my shoulder before anything scary happens. She makes up songs about the dog. She still insists on being tucked in even though she'd die before admitting it to her friends. She has never done a single thing in her life that deserved what was done to her. My wife's name is Sasha. We married 12 years ago. The first 8 years were good. I want to be fair about that. We were happy in the way that most people are happy, imperfectly, incompletely, but genuinely. When Poppy was born, I thought we'd found something solid. I thought we were building something that would last. When Sasha's mother died 4 years ago, the inheritance changed things. Not immediately. Gradually, the way a foundation shifts. You don't notice until the cracks appear in the walls. Her brother Noel moved from Edmonton, and suddenly he was everywhere. Family dinners, weekends, summer visits that stretched into months. Sasha started talking differently about the future, about what we were owed, about how certain people held other people back. I was one of those people. I understood that slowly. Too slowly. Noel was 38 years old, unemployed in the sense that people become unemployed when they've run through enough money to have stopped trying. He had a record, aggravated assault, 8 years old, and more recently a civil suit for defrauding a former business partner that had been settled quietly out of court. He was charming the way certain people are charming, effortlessly and for reasons you come to distrust. He had Sasha's complete loyalty, and I never understood why until I started listening more carefully to the things they said to each other when they thought I couldn't hear. About 8 months before that morning in Sudbury, something shifted in my gut. A structural engineer's instinct, maybe. I started paying attention differently. I started documenting. I put cameras in the main rooms of our house: living room, kitchen, basement, hallway. Audio recorders in Poppy's bedroom and the playroom. I told myself it was precaution. I told myself nothing would come of it. I uploaded everything automatically to a cloud server I managed through work. 3 days after I set up that system, I came home from a site visit in Sault Ste. Marie to find Poppy quiet in a way she hadn't been before. Not sad. Something else. She flinched when Noel came into the room and then immediately tried to act like she hadn't. She sat pressed against my side all through dinner and kept watching the door. I asked her about it later, just the two of us. She said nothing happened. She said everything was fine. She said it in the voice of a child who has been told what to say. I started watching the recordings, What I found in those recordings is the reason I'm still angry enough, 3 years later, that I have to put the phone down sometimes when I'm writing this. Noel had been in our house almost every day while I was working. Sasha too, obviously. But the pattern was this. When I left, something shifted. Poppy became a problem to be managed. She was too loud, too needy, too much. Noel mocked her at the dinner table while Sasha laughed. They called her dramatic when she cried. They told her she was embarrassing. They took her tablet away for days at a time without explanation and laughed when she asked why. And there was the cold storage room, the one that locked from the outside. On 4 separate occasions in those recordings, Poppy had been put in that room. Lights off, door locked. Sometimes for what the timestamps told me was 45 minutes, once for over an hour. They called it consequence time. They told her that normal children didn't need so much attention. They told her that her father babied her and she needed to learn how the real world worked. She was 8 years old at the time of the first recording. When I watched those videos, I did not rage in the way I expected to. I went very still. I am a person who goes still when things become serious, which my former Army Reserve sergeant once told me was either a useful quality or a dangerous one depending on the circumstances. What I felt was not hot. It was cold and clear and absolute. I thought, this ends, not eventually. Now, I copied every file. I backed everything up to 3 separate drives and 2 cloud servers. I called a lawyer, a family lawyer in Sudbury, who had been recommended to me by a colleague whose own divorce had been complicated. Her name was Adrienne Fulton, and she was exactly the kind of person you want in your corner when things are bad, methodical, unshockable, and quietly furious on your behalf. Adrienne told me to keep documenting. Keep recording. Don't tip them off. Build the case. So I did. For 8 months, I built the case while living in my own home, pretending I didn't know what I knew, watching my daughter with the particular ache of a parent who understands that stepping in too soon might make things worse rather than better, who is trying to time something perfectly when every second costs something. And then came the morning I was 3 hours north of Sudbury when Bev called. I drove that highway in a way I am not proud of. There was a part of my brain that kept running calculations, travel time, police response time, whether Bev had gotten inside yet, whether the cold storage door had a lock Poppy could open from the inside. It didn't. I knew it didn't. That was the thing that lived in my chest the whole drive like a stone. Bev texted at 7:14 inside. Poppy is out. She's okay. Police are here. The stone didn't move. I needed to see her myself. I got home at 9:52 a.m. 2 OPP cruisers were parked in front of the house. A third vehicle I didn't recognize. My next-door neighbor from the other side, a retired contractor named Gord Whitmore, was standing at the end of my driveway. He gave me a look that was both grim and relieved when I pulled in. Noel was sitting on the front steps in handcuffs. He had a split lip. He was not looking at me, and I was glad about that, because I don't know what would have happened if he had been. Bev was in my kitchen with Poppy. My daughter was wrapped in the blanket from her bedroom, and she was holding a mug of hot chocolate that Bev had made, both hands around it, the way she does when she's cold even in July. When she saw me come through the door, her face did something that I cannot describe without stopping. She said, "Daddy," in a voice that was barely anything, and then she was in my arms and I couldn't hear anything else for a while. She had red marks on her wrists where she'd been pulling at the door. She'd been in that room for over 2 hours. She had asked. She told me later. She had asked so many times to come out. She'd told them she was scared. She'd told them her chest felt tight, which is a thing that happens to her sometimes, a mild anxiety response her doctor had told us about 2 years earlier and given us strategies for managing. Noel had said through the locked door that it wasn't real, that she was faking, that she needed to figure out how to calm herself down like a normal person. Sasha had not been in the house. She had left that morning before any of it started, on her way to a spa day she'd booked 2 weeks prior. Her phone had gone directly to voicemail when the OPP tried to reach her. The constable who took my statement was a young man named Sergeant Doyle, who handled the whole thing with a steadiness that I was grateful for. He'd already pulled Poppy's initial account with a child advocate present. He told me that what Bev had witnessed and what was visible on the home security footage was enough for immediate charges. Noel was charged that afternoon. Unlawful confinement of a minor, child endangerment. Assault causing bodily harm, the marks on Poppy's wrists, and bruising on her upper arm that the examining physician at Health Sciences North had photographed and flagged as older than that morning. Older, I said. The doctor, a woman named Adami, who had the controlled expression of someone who has learned to be careful, said yes. Weeks, possibly. Multiple incidents. She was a mandatory reporter. The report had already been filed. That evening, after Poppy was asleep in a borrowed bedroom at Gord Whitmore's house, because the OPP had flagged mine as an active scene and I wouldn't have taken her back there anyway, I sat with Adrian Fulton and a USB drive containing 8 months of recordings, and we built something watertight. The Crown attorney assigned to the case was a woman named Yvonne Malek. She was experienced with family violence cases, and she listened to the audio files with the expression of someone who has heard a great deal and is still capable of being disturbed. On the third recording, she stopped it herself and sat quietly for a moment before asking me to continue. "How long were you documenting?" she asked when we were done. 8 months, I said. "And you never confronted them?" "No," she looked at me for a long moment. "That was difficult." "Yes," I said. "It was." There is one recording I have not been able to listen to since the first time. It was from 4 months before the morning Bev called me, Sasha and Noelle, in the kitchen, after they thought Poppy was asleep. Poppy was not asleep. She was sitting at the top of the basement stairs, which she had done sometimes when the house felt unsafe. I learned this later from her therapist, who explained it as a proximity-seeking behavior, staying close to where the adults were without being visible to them. Poppy had heard everything. Sasha's voice on that recording, she's been telling her teacher. Nothing specific, but enough that the teacher called. We need to make sure she understands the consequences of that. Noel, the basement room. Sasha, more than once, until she stops. Noel, and if she doesn't stop? A pause. Then she will. There was another conversation. 6 weeks before the morning in Sudbury. Sasha and a person I didn't recognize. A man's voice, low, discussing something in the kind of shorthand people use when they don't want to say the thing they're saying directly. References to my work schedule. My upcoming 3-week posting to a remote site in the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario. The kind of site where accidents happened, where communication was difficult, where a structural failure would not raise the kind of immediate questions it would in a city. References to an insurance policy. I had increased my life insurance 14 months prior at Sasha's request. $2.5 million. She was the named beneficiary. I had thought it was reasonable financial planning, and I had signed the papers without thinking about it much, which is something I have thought about many times since. I gave those recordings to Sergeant Doyle and Yvonne Malek separately on the same day. I also made calls. I had served 6 years in the Canadian Army Reserves before my engineering career made it impractical to continue. I am not a violent person, and I don't want to imply that I am. What the military gave me, more than anything, was a contact list. People who are good at finding things. People who are good at confirming that the things they find are properly documented and legally preserved. People who understand the difference between justice and revenge and are skilled at the former. One of those people, I'll call him by the name he uses professionally, which is simply Rourke, had spent 15 years in signals intelligence before transitioning to private forensic accounting. He is extremely good at finding money that other people believe they have hidden. I asked Rourke to look at Sasha's finances. What he found took 3 weeks to fully document, and I will summarize it because the details are complicated, and most of them are now part of the public court record anyway. Her mother's estate had been worth approximately $1.4 million. Sasha had been the executor. Over the course of 2 years, she had redirected nearly $600,000 of that into accounts that were not listed in the estate documentation. Accounts in her name and in Noelle's name, and in the name of a numbered company registered in Alberta that existed for no apparent purpose except to hold money. Other beneficiaries of the estate, cousins, an aunt, the charitable organization her mother had specified, had received less than half of what they were owed. The sister she was visiting in Montreal when all of this happened? She hadn't been told about the estate at all. She had no idea her mother had left her anything. Sasha had handled the paperwork herself and simply not told her. I contacted the sister. I'll call her Marguerite here, though that's not her name. She is a quiet, careful person who took in the information I gave her with the stillness of someone having a very old suspicion confirmed. She cried once, briefly, and then she thanked me and called her own lawyer. That civil suit is still ongoing. She will win it. The documentation is airtight. Noel's criminal trial came first. It took 11 days. I sat through most of it. Poppy did not attend. Her therapist, Dr. Ria Patel from Chio in Ottawa, where we'd relocated temporarily to be near my brother and his family, was clear that Poppy's account had been given through proper channels and that she did not need to sit in a courtroom to receive closure. What she needed was consistency, safety, and time. Poppy was given all 3 things, but she asked me once if the judge had heard what happened to her. I told her, yes, the judge heard every word. She seemed satisfied with that. The footage played in the courtroom. The audio recordings. Dr. Adeyemi testified about the injuries. A forensic child psychologist named Dr. Fontaine from the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto testified about the documented psychological impact of repeated isolation trauma in children and specifically about the use of known phobias. Poppy was terrified of the dark, had been since she was 4. It was in her medical file as instruments of deliberate psychological distress. This was not spontaneous, Dr. Fontaine said. The selection of this specific environment, the repeated nature of the confinement, the presence of an adult monitoring response, these indicate planning. This was not a parent losing patience. This was a system. Noel's lawyer, a young man who looked like he'd drawn the short straw, argued that Noel had been acting under the belief that this was a legitimate parenting strategy endorsed by the child's mother and that he had no independent authority in the household. He was not a parent. He was a guest. The Crown's response was that being a guest does not entitle you to lock a 9-year-old in a dark room for 2 hours while she hyperventilates. The jury was out for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts, Noel was sentenced to 14 years. Justice Hargrove's words at sentencing were the kind that get quoted afterward because they earn it. You treated a child's fear as an instrument. You measured her suffering and found it useful. There is a particular kind of cruelty reserved for those who know exactly what they are doing and choose to do it anyway, and the court takes it seriously. Sasha's trial was longer, more complicated. The estate fraud charges had been added by then, and Yvonne Malek had filed a motion to include the financial evidence as part of a pattern of premeditated harm. The argument being that what happened to Poppy was not separate from the question of the insurance policy and the planned work posting to the remote site. They were part of the same thing. The judge allowed it. I won't describe the whole trial. There are parts of it that belong to the public record, and parts of it that belong to Poppy, and the parts that belong to Poppy I'm keeping. I will say this. There was a moment on the third day when a recording was played in which Sasha's voice said, in reference to our daughter, she'll stop telling people things when she figures out that no one's going to do anything about it. And the courtroom was very quiet after that. The kind of quiet that has weight to it. Sasha was convicted on the criminal charges, child endangerment, conspiracy to commit confinement, and once the financial investigation was complete, 2 counts of fraud over $5,000. The conspiracy to commit murder charge did not survive to trial. There was not enough direct evidence, though the circumstantial case was compelling enough that Yvonne Malek believed we'd have had a chance with a different judge. That investigation remains open. I have been told not to discuss it further. She was sentenced to 18 years, no parole eligibility for 9. The day the verdict came in, I was at the rink with Poppy, who had started skating lessons that fall. She didn't know it was verdict day. I'd kept that from her deliberately. She was working on crossovers, which she found infuriating because her left side was weaker than her right. And when I got the text from Adrian, I read it twice, and then put my phone in my pocket and watched my daughter fall down on the ice and get back up again and try the same thing a second time. Did you see that? She called. I almost had it. I saw, I said. Do it again. There is a thing Bev said to me about a year after all of this. We were standing on the street in the new neighborhood where Poppy and I had settled, a small city in the Kawarthas, with a good school, and a stable I'd found 40 minutes outside of town where Poppy could ride on Saturdays. Bev had driven up to visit. She does that. She'll keep doing that for the rest of her life if I let her, which I will. She said, "You're not angry anymore, or not the same kind of angry." I thought about that. No, I said. I'm not. Is it because of the sentences? I considered partly. But it's more that. I built something over those 8 months. I built a case that meant every single thing they did was documented and provable and permanent. They couldn't deny it or minimize it or make it about something else. Every door they tried to close, I'd already put evidence through it. Bev nodded slowly. Sasha thought she had planned everything, I said. And she had in a way. She'd planned Noel's access. She'd planned my work schedule. She'd planned the insurance. But she hadn't planned for 8 months of footage on a cloud server I managed myself. She didn't know you were watching. No. She thought I trusted her. You did trust her, Bev said. Not unkindly. Yes, I said. For a while I did. Poppy is 12 now. The nightmares are mostly gone. She still doesn't like the dark, probably always won't, and I've made peace with that. There are night lights in every room of our house, and I don't call them anything except what they are. Things that make a room safer. She has a therapist she likes who she sees every 2 weeks. She has a horse she is absolutely certain she has named. The horse's registered name is something else entirely, but as far as Poppy is concerned, his name is Biscuit. She told me recently that she thought about the basement sometimes. Not in a bad way, she said, which I wasn't sure I believed entirely, but she said, I remember thinking, when it was really dark, that you didn't know where I was. And then I thought, if you knew, you would come. And you did. So now when I'm scared of something, I think about that instead. I didn't say anything for a moment. Does that help? I asked. Yeah, she said. Pretty much always. There are things the legal system cannot give back. The year of therapy, the nightmares. The way she still sits with her back to a wall in restaurants because she likes to see the door. The fact that she was 8 years old and terrified and asking to come out of a dark room, and the people who were supposed to protect her were sitting on the other side of that door, waiting. What the legal system can do is make it permanent. It can say, this happened, it is documented, it is real, and the people who did it are paying for it in ways that cannot be undone. It can terminate parental rights, which it did 11 months after the verdict, in a hearing so quiet and procedural that it almost seemed too small for what it meant. The judge asked Poppy if she understood what was happening. She said yes. She asked if she wanted to say anything. Poppy said, I want it to say in the official papers that she doesn't have a daughter anymore. The judge said that was exactly what it would say. If you're watching this and something in it sounds familiar, if the pattern of it, the isolation, the documentation, the way it escalated so slowly you almost didn't notice, if any of that sounds like something you know from the inside, call someone. Don't wait until you have everything figured out. Start documenting, yes, but also reach out, because there are people whose job is to help you do this safely. In Canada, if you're concerned about a child, contact your provincial child welfare authority. In Ontario, that's the Children's Aid Society, reachable through childrensaid.ca, or by calling 1-866-995-9497. Kids Help Phone is available 24 hours at 1-800-668-6868. By text by sending hello to 686868 or through their app. If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, the Assaulted Women's Helpline is 1-866-863-0511, available around the clock in multiple languages. Children who are being harmed rely on adults to see it and say something. What they fear most is that no one will do anything. Proving them wrong is the most important thing we can do. Poppy said you would come. I came. That's all this story is, really. I came.